By the time the cranberry sauce hit the table, I knew something was wrong. Not because anyone was arguing, not because voices were raised. It was the smiles. You live long enough, you learn this. Real trouble doesn't announce itself. It arrives dressed as celebration, wearing good manners and a rehearsed tone. That Christmas Eve, trouble was holding a wine glass. My name is Evelyn Carter. I was 68 years old, sitting at the head of the dining table in the house I'd lived in for over 30 years. My house, the one I'd scrubbed, repaired, paid for, and grown old inside. Around me, my family laughed like nothing in the world was out of place. Candles smelled like cinnamon. The turkey looked flawless. The tablecloth, hand-stitched decades ago, lay smooth beneath my palms. It was a perfect scene, and perfect scenes are usually lies. Across from me sat my son, Daniel, 32, clean-cut, tired eyes. He had that look men get when they're trying very hard to appear settled. Beside him was Lena, 5 months pregnant, peach-colored dress stretched neatly over her stomach, hair perfect, smile confident, too confident. She stood up before dessert, tapped her glass with a spoon. That sound sliced through the room. Conversations stopped. Children froze. Even the background music seemed to lower itself, like it understood this moment mattered. "Family," Lena said warmly, her smile wide and steady. "I just want to say how grateful I am. This year changed everything." Daniel looked at her like she hung the moon. My stomach tightened. "As you all know," she continued, resting a hand on her belly, "we're bringing a baby into this world, and that means responsibility, structure, smarter decisions." She paused. Let the silence work for her. She knew how to command attention. "So Daniel and I talked," she said, voice sweet, "and starting today, I'll be managing all the finances for this family." The room stayed quiet. Then, approval. Soft nods, murmurs. Someone smiled like this was overdue. Then she turned to me. "Evelyn," she said gently, the way people speak to children and the elderly, "this morning, Daniel and I canceled your credit card." Canceled. The word landed heavy. My son didn't look at me. He stared at his plate like it could save him. "At your age," Lena continued, "you shouldn't have to worry about money. If you need something, you can just ask us. Ahead of time, of course." The room broke into applause. Actual applause. Someone laughed and said, "Honestly, that's smart. My mom needs the same setup." Daniel finally looked at me, touched my shoulder. That soft, apologetic smile, the one that means, "Please don't embarrass me." "Mom," he said quietly, "this is for the best. You don't have to worry anymore." Worry. I raised him alone after his father died, worked 2 jobs, missed meals so he wouldn't, fixed my own roof, paid every bill on time for 40 years. And now I shouldn't worry. I didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't raise my voice. I smiled, slow, calm, almost kind. The kind of smile that makes confident people uneasy. I set my glass down. The clink echoed louder than it should have. Then I stood. My knees complained, but I stood tall anyway. And I looked directly at my son. Not at Lena. At my son. "Daniel," I said evenly, "you really don't know, do you?" The room froze. His smile faltered, just a little. "Know what?" he asked. Lena laughed nervously. "Oh, come on, Evelyn, let's not make a scene." I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch. Because what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was this. The woman they'd just publicly stripped of control wasn't weak, wasn't confused, wasn't broke. And that house they were sitting in, that wasn't even close to the full story. But to understand why that single question rattled them, you need to know who I was before I became the quiet old woman they thought they could manage. And trust me, the truth was about to ruin their holiday. What secret had Evelyn hidden for decades, and why did she allow everyone at that table to believe she had nothing?
Before I was the woman sitting quietly at that Christmas table, I was someone else entirely. I was 28 when my life split clean down the middle. My husband, Mark Carter, died on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Wrong place, wrong time. A delivery truck ran a red light, and the man who used to leave his boots by the door and hum while shaving never came home. I was 7 months pregnant, standing in a hospital hallway that smelled like bleach and bad news, holding my stomach like I could keep the world from collapsing if I held tight enough. I didn't scream. I didn't faint. I went numb. At the funeral, people kept calling me strong. I learned to hate that word quickly. Strong meant you weren't allowed to fall apart. Strong meant bills still arrived. Strong meant grief didn't pause for mercy. 2 weeks later, a man in a gray coat knocked on my door. He wasn't there with condolences. He was there with paperwork. Mark had taken out loans I hadn't fully understood. Repairs, business ideas, promises made on optimism instead of math. Death didn't erase signatures. It didn't soften deadlines. $50,000. That number sat on my kitchen table like a verdict. I made barely enough sewing clothes for neighbors to cover groceries. That night, my hands shook so badly I couldn't thread a needle. I sat on the floor with my back against the couch and whispered to my unborn son, "I don't know how we're going to survive, but we will." Not because I had a plan, because quitting wasn't an option. The next morning, I gathered my designs into a worn folder and walked 6 blocks to the nicest house I'd ever stood in front of. Years earlier, I'd altered a dress for a woman named Margaret Whitmore. Old money, sharp eyes, the kind of woman who could tell quality by touch alone. She opened the door, took one look at me, pregnant, exhausted, desperate, and didn't ask why I was there. She asked what I could do. I showed her my work. She didn't praise it, she studied it, quietly, carefully. Then she nodded. "Come inside," she said. "Let's talk business." That conversation didn't save me out of kindness, it saved me through education. Margaret didn't pity me, she taught me, showed me why charging by the piece was foolish, explained margins, contracts, clients who paid on time versus clients who drained you dry and smiled while doing it. "You don't sew dresses," she told me once. "You solve problems. Price it that way." I worked like my life depended on it, because it did. Before sunrise, after midnight. Daniel slept in a cradle beside my sewing table, rocked by the rhythm of the pedal moving up and down. I missed weekends, missed parties, missed rest, but I never missed a deadline. Word spread quietly. 1 client became 3, 3 became 10. Eventually, I rented a tiny workspace and hired help. Nothing glamorous, just sustainable. By the time Daniel turned 3, the debt was gone. By the time he turned 8, I owned the building I worked in. And by the time he reached high school, I learned something most people never do. Money doesn't announce itself when it's handled well. So I stayed quiet. I didn't upgrade our life, didn't move houses, didn't flash success. I wanted my son hungry, not for comfort, but for purpose. I let him believe I struggled. I let him believe effort mattered more than inheritance. And he grew into a good man because of it. Daniel went to college believing scholarships paid his way. They didn't. I did, quietly, through accounts he never saw. He graduated proud, independent, convinced he'd built everything himself. I was proud of him. By then, I was financially untouchable. But invisibility has a cost, because when you teach people you have nothing, some of them don't just believe you, they start treating you like it. And Lena? She noticed. Long before Christmas, long before the toast, she was watching, measuring silence, mistaking restraint for weakness. And when Daniel stopped seeing me as the woman who survived everything, she stepped in. When did Lena realize Evelyn wasn't just simple, and what decision did she quietly make once she thought she understood the truth? I met Lena on a Saturday afternoon. I remember too clearly. Daniel showed up at my door, smiling too wide, nerves written all over his face. "Mom," he said, stepping aside, "I want you to meet someone." She stood behind him, sunglasses still on. Not looking at me, looking at my house. That was the first sign. Curious people look slowly, judging people scan fast. Her eyes moved from the porch railing to the paint on the door to the cracked step near the threshold. Inventory, not interest. She removed her sunglasses only after she'd finished taking mental notes. "Nice to finally meet you," she said, shaking my hand. Firm grip, quick release, polite smile that never reached her eyes. Inside, she kept doing it, glancing, measuring, cataloging. The old armchair, the modest television, the faded curtains I'd refused to replace because they still did their job. Daniel talked about work, about plans, about how amazing Lena was. She nodded at the right moments, but didn't listen. Her attention kept drifting, circling the room like she was pricing it out. We ate pot roast, Daniel's favorite since he was a boy. Lena took 2 bites, smiled politely, and asked if we had dessert. When they left, I stood in the doorway longer than necessary, watching her walk to the car. Something in my chest felt tight. I'd spent decades negotiating contracts, reading people who smiled while sharpening knives. Lena had that same energy, smooth on the surface, calculating underneath. Over the next few months, Daniel changed. Not dramatically, just enough. Sunday visits became excuses. His clothes got nicer, his phone got newer, his opinions started sounding borrowed. "She says image matters in my field," he told me once. She says. When they announced their engagement, Lena came to my house alone. That surprised me. She sat straight-backed at my dining room table, hands folded neatly. "I just want us to be close," she said. "You mean so much to Daniel." Her words were warm. Her eyes weren't. "I know it hasn't been easy for you," she added gently. "Raising him alone, struggling." There it was, the version of me she believed in. "I want you to know that once Daniel and I build our life together, you won't have to worry anymore. We'll take care of you." Take care of you. I thanked her, calmly, politely. After she left, I opened my safe for the first time in months. Inside were documents Daniel had never seen. Property deeds, investment summaries, accounts built slowly, quietly, over decades of discipline. That night, I made a choice. I wouldn't correct her. Not yet. Because Daniel loved her. Real love, the kind that makes people defensive and blind. If I exposed the truth too soon, he wouldn't hear it as protection, he'd hear it as interference. So I waited. That was my mistake. Once they married, the tone shifted. Comments about my house being too much for one person, questions about my bills, suggestions that Daniel should help manage things. Always concern, never control. At least not openly. When Lena got pregnant, everything accelerated. Suddenly, my house wasn't just old, it was unsafe. My independence wasn't strength, it was stubbornness. My silence wasn't dignity, it was confusion. Then came the paperwork. Daniel sat in my living room holding documents he didn't fully understand. "It's just precaution, Mom," he said. "Talk to a lawyer. This would protect you. Transfer access, grant permissions, just in case." I signed one document, not because I didn't understand, because I wanted them comfortable. People reveal their worst when they think they've already won. And Lena? She stopped pretending. She corrected me in public, excluded me in private, rewrote stories so Daniel questioned my memory instead of her motives. By the time Christmas approached, she wasn't managing things quietly anymore. She was managing me. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the quiet woman they were dismissing had already decided how this would end. And it wasn't going to be loud. It was going to be precise. What moment finally pushed Lena from concern into open control? And why did Daniel fail to see it until it was almost too late?
Control doesn't usually arrive shouting. It comes smiling, carrying reasons, wrapped in concern. After I signed that document, the shift was immediate. Lena stopped asking. She started deciding. At first, it was subtle enough to dismiss. A canceled visit here, a rescheduled call there. Daniel still phoned, but his voice sounded filtered, rushed, checked, as if every sentence passed through approval before reaching me. Then came the first real cut. Quiet, clean. One Sunday afternoon, I showed up at their house with a container of tamales I'd been making since dawn, Daniel's favorite. I rang the bell and waited, listening to the faint hum inside. The door opened just enough for Lena's face to appear. "Oh," she said, blinking like she'd forgotten I existed. "Didn't Daniel tell you? We have guests." Behind her, the house was silent, empty. "He said 2:00, I replied, holding the container. She sighed, patient and practiced. "Plans changed. With the baby coming, we can't do unplanned visits anymore. You understand." Unplanned. I was his mother, not a delivery service. She reached for the food. "I'll give these to Daniel." I pulled the container back. "I'll give them to him myself." Her smile tightened. "Suit yourself." The door closed. I stood there longer than I should have, holding warm food that suddenly felt very cold. Daniel called 3 days later, apologized vaguely, didn't ask what happened. That's how erasure works, not with confrontation, but with neglect. The next humiliation arrived disguised as kindness. Lena called midweek, voice soft and sweet. "Could you take me to my appointment tomorrow? Daniel has work." Of course, I said yes. At the doctor's office, the nurse smiled at me. "And you are—" "Mother-in-law," Lena corrected quickly. "My mom couldn't make it." During the visit, decisions happened around me, not with me. She spoke, the doctor spoke, I existed as background noise. Afterward, she suggested we stop at the mall. She led me into a high-end baby store, strollers lined up like luxury cars, cribs with price tags that made my chest tighten. She pointed, chose, nodded. Then she turned to me. "Can you help with this? It's for your grandchild." I opened my wallet. $300, what I normally carried. She stared at it. "That's all?" Her laugh was sharp, public, cutting. "Well," she said, pulling out a gold card, "I'll cover it." The ride home was silent. She didn't get out of the car when she dropped me off. That night, I cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to release it. But tears don't last. Anger does. The family gathering sealed it. Cousins, laughter, wine, noise.
everyone settling into soft chairs while I was directed to a hard wooden seat near the edge of the room. I brought a chocolate cake, Daniel's favorite since he was 6. Lena glanced at it. Oh, we already ordered dessert. She slid my cake into the back of the fridge like it was an afterthought. During dinner, my plate had less meat, more salad. When she stood to toast, she thanked everyone but me. When I left, no one noticed. 2 weeks later, the final move landed. I went to the bank. The ATM swallowed my card. Inside, the teller spoke gently, as if delivering bad weather. The authorized holder requested cancellation. I already knew who. I called Daniel. There was hesitation. Then his voice softened, careful and rehearsed. "It's for your protection, Mom. Lena read about scams." Protection. That word hardened something inside me. They didn't want to help me. They wanted to control me. That night, I opened my safe. I took out every document I'd spent decades building, deeds, accounts, proof. And for the first time, I stopped asking myself how to fix this. I started planning how to end it. Quietly. On my terms. And Christmas was coming. What plan did Evelyn set in motion that would turn a Christmas toast into a moment no one at that table would ever forget?
People think revenge is loud. They imagine shouting, exposure, scorched earth, a dramatic moment where everything burns at once. That's not how real power moves. Real power waits. After the bank incident, I didn't confront Daniel again. I didn't argue, accuse, or demand explanations. I thanked him for looking out for me and told him I understood. That confused him. People expect resistance when they cross a line. Calm acceptance makes them careless. Lena, especially. She stopped filtering her tone, stopped pretending this was temporary. She spoke to me like a problem she'd already solved, like something fragile that needed managing, not respecting. She believed the game was over. She believed I was dependent. She believed wrong. The morning after my card was canceled, I made one phone call. "Mr. Harris," I said when he answered, "I need everything organized. Every asset, every account, every document." There was a pause. "I was wondering when you'd call," he replied. "We'll need it ready by Christmas," I added. Another pause. Then, calmly, "I'll prepare the briefcase." That briefcase held my real life, not the version Lena had invented, not the woman they'd reduced me to, the truth. Over the next 2 weeks, I played my role perfectly. I asked Daniel for cash once, just once, for groceries. He sent it immediately with a heart emoji and a "love you, Mom." Lena watched that exchange closely. I could feel it. She was measuring how tight the leash was. I stopped correcting her, stopped pushing back when she spoke over me or answered questions meant for me. I let her tell stories about my forgetfulness and my confusion. People always reveal their worst when they think you're powerless, and Lena revealed plenty. Christmas invitations went out. The dinner would be at their house. Big family, full audience, a stage, exactly what I needed. The morning of Christmas Eve, I dressed the way they expected me to. Soft colors, simple clothes, no jewelry that hinted at anything more. I wanted them comfortable, certain. Before leaving, I stood in my bedroom and looked at myself in the mirror, not with pity, with respect. "You survived worse than this," I whispered. "Don't forget who you are." At 6 o'clock, I arrived with a bowl of fruit punch and neatly mapped gifts for the baby. Lena greeted me with her usual tight smile. Non-alcoholic cider is in the kitchen. She already corrected my choices. Daniel hugged me. He felt thinner, tired. That hurt more than her words ever had. Dinner unfolded exactly as expected. Side comments, subtle corrections, quiet control disguised as care. Then Lena stood, glass raised, smile bright, confidence blooming. Her announcement landed like a final stamp of authority. She believed this moment sealed everything, that the room would remember her as responsible, as brave. I watched everyone clap, watched Daniel stand beside her, proud and unaware, and I realized something important in that moment. Daniel hadn't betrayed me out of cruelty. He'd betrayed me out of ignorance, and ignorance doesn't protect you from consequences. When I stood and asked my question, "Daniel, you really don't know, do you?" I saw it. Fear. Just for a second. Lena's eyes flicked to me, sharp and alert. That was my first crack. Small, but real. That was my signal. At exactly 9:45, the doorbell rang. Lena frowned. "Were you expecting someone?" I smiled. "Yes." Daniel turned. "Who?" Before anyone could speculate further, the door opened. Mr. Harris stepped inside. No drama, no announcement, just a quiet man in his 60s carrying a worn brown leather briefcase like it mattered. The room went silent. Lena stared at him. "And who is this?" Daniel looked at me, confused. "Mom?" I met his eyes calmly. "This is my accountant." And with that, everything they thought they knew was about to fall apart. Who was the man with the briefcase, and how would one quiet reveal dismantle everything Lena thought she controlled?
The room changed the moment Mr. Harris stepped inside. Not dramatically, not loudly. It changed the way air does before a storm. Heavy, expectant, uncomfortable. He didn't look impressive. No sharp suit, no polished shoes. Just a calm man in his 60s, holding a worn brown leather briefcase like it carried more weight than leather and paper should. Lena blinked once, then smiled tightly. "And who is this?" Daniel looked between us. "Mom?" I nodded. "This is my accountant." That single word shifted everything. Accountant. Lena laughed softly, as if indulging a child. "Evelyn, you don't need an accountant. Daniel handles things now." Mr. Harris didn't respond. He stepped forward and set the briefcase on the dining table, the same table where Lena had announced my financial death. The thud was quiet, solid, final. "I've worked with your mother for 23 years, he said calmly, "and I was invited." Daniel frowned. "Invited? For what?" "For clarity," I replied. Lena crossed her arms. "This really isn't appropriate." "Oh," I said gently, "it's exactly appropriate." Mr. Harris opened the briefcase. Inside were neatly labeled folders. No clutter, no confusion, no signs of a woman who couldn't manage her own affairs. He slid the first document across the table. Commercial property deed, 1 of 8. 8? Daniel's head snapped up. 8 what? "Commercial units," Mr. Harris continued. "Fully leased. Pharmacies, offices, retail spaces." The silence that followed was thick. Lena's smile cracked. "That's not funny," she said. Mr. Harris slid another page forward. Monthly rental income, net. He named the number. No exaggeration, no pause, just fact. Daniel's face drained of color. "Mom?" I met his eyes. "I didn't stay quiet to deceive you. I stayed quiet to let you become your own man." Mr. Harris wasn't finished.
3 residential properties, he said next. Downtown district, long-term executive leases. Another number. Someone at the table whispered, "Is this real?" Mr. Harris nodded once. All verifiable, all current. Lena's hand tightened around her glass. "This is manipulation," she snapped. I turned to her, calm and steady. "No, this is truth. You mistook my silence for weakness." Mr. Harris reached into the briefcase one last time and removed a single document. Revocation of power of attorney, effective immediately. Daniel looked down at it. "Revocation?" "Yes," Mr. Harris replied. "Your mother never granted access to her primary accounts, only a limited temporary authorization tied to one property." Lena's mouth opened, closed. "That means," I added quietly, "you never controlled me. You only believed you did." The room froze. Then Daniel stood. "I think," he said hoarsely, "everyone should step out for a moment." No one argued. One by one, family members slipped away. No eye contact, no applause now. The confidence from earlier felt like a distant memory. Soon it was just the 3 of us, Daniel, Lena, and me. Lena spoke first. "You embarrassed us." I shook my head. "You embarrassed yourselves." Daniel stared at the table. "You let me cancel your card." "Yes." "You let her talk to you like that." "Yes." "Why?" His voice cracked. "Because I needed to know who you would become when you thought I had nothing left to give." He sank back into his chair. And in that moment I knew the truth had landed. But understanding is only the beginning. The consequences? They were just getting started. With the truth exposed and the family gone, what choice would Daniel make, and how would Lena react when control finally slipped through her fingers?
After everyone left, the house felt hollow. No laughter, no music, no clinking glasses, just the quiet hum of the heater and the sound of 3 people realizing nothing would ever be the same. Daniel sat at the dining table, elbows resting on the wood, hands clasped tightly as if holding himself together. Lena stood near the kitchen island, arms crossed, jaw set. She looked less angry than exposed, like someone who had misread the room and couldn't take it back. I remained standing. Not out of defiance, out of clarity. "Say something," Lena snapped, breaking the silence. "You're just going to let her do this?" Daniel didn't look up. "Do what?" "Humiliate us," she said sharply, "in front of everyone." I tilted my head. "You canceled my credit card in front of everyone." "That was different," she shot back. "No, it wasn't." Daniel finally raised his eyes. They were red, older than they'd been an hour ago. "Mom," he said quietly, "did you ever plan to tell me?" I pulled out a chair and sat across from him, not towering, not lecturing. "I planned to tell you when money stopped defining how you saw me, and when you didn't need me to be smaller so you could feel bigger." Lena scoffed. "That's convenient." I turned to her slowly. "What's convenient is calling control concern when it suits you." She stepped forward. "I was protecting this family." "From what? My independence?" Daniel flinched. "You told him I was confused. You questioned my memory. You spoke about my future like it was a liability." Lena opened her mouth, then closed it. Daniel looked at her. Really looked. "Did you say those things?" She hesitated. Just long enough. "I was worried. About your mom. About us. About the baby." Daniel stood, slowly. "You told me my mother couldn't manage her own life." I said she was stubborn. She raised me alone. She survived things I can't even imagine. Lena's tone hardened. So what? You're taking her side now? There aren't sides. There's truth. She laughed bitterly. And what about the house, the money, the future you promised me? I answered before Daniel could. I promised you nothing. Her eyes snapped to mine. You let me believe. I let you assume. Those are different. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. You married me thinking my mother had nothing? Silence. That was the answer. I loved you, he said quietly, and I loved what you could become. The honesty was ugly. Daniel stepped back like he'd been struck. I stood then and reached for my coat. This is where I step out. Daniel looked at me, panic breaking through. Mom, wait. No, I said gently. This isn't my marriage. These aren't my decisions to fix. I turned to him. I didn't come here to punish you. I came to stop you from losing yourself. Lena crossed her arms. So what now? You walk away rich and righteous? I met her gaze, calm, unmoved. I walk away free. At the door, I paused. Daniel, I said without turning around, if we're going to have a relationship, it will be on equal ground. No management, no permission, no pity. His voice broke. I understand. I stepped outside into the cold night air. My shoulders felt lighter than they had in years. Because revenge doesn't always look like destruction. Sometimes it looks like leaving people alone with the consequences of who they chose to be. With Evelyn gone and the truth finally spoken, how would Daniel face the wreckage of his marriage, and what would Lena do once her leverage disappeared?
Daniel didn't sleep that night. The house was too quiet for rest. No television, no music, just the low hum of appliances and the echo of everything he hadn't questioned soon enough. He sat alone at the dining table long after I left, staring at the place where the briefcase had been, replaying moments he'd brushed aside, conversations he'd let end early, warnings disguised as discomfort. Lena went to bed without a word. That silence told him more than any argument could have. The next morning, Daniel brewed coffee out of habit, poured 2 cups, stopped when he realized only one would be touched. He stood there for a moment, staring at the second mug, then poured it down the sink. When he sat across from Lena, she didn't look up from her phone. "We need to talk," he said. She sighed, irritated. "About what?" "About my mother." Her jaw tightened. "I knew this was coming. You told me she was confused, that she couldn't manage her life. I was worried. You convinced me to cancel her card without even telling her." Lena finally looked up. And I believed you," he said quietly. "That part's on me." She softened then, reaching for his hand. "I was trying to protect us." "No," he replied, pulling away gently. "You were protecting control." Her expression hardened. "You don't understand," she snapped. "Your mom made us look foolish." "She never raised her voice," Daniel said. "You did." Silence stretched between them. "She let me see who I was becoming," he added, "and I don't like it." Lena stood abruptly. "So now you're choosing her over me?" "I'm choosing accountability," he said. That word scared her. By noon, Daniel was standing on my porch. He waited longer than necessary, the same way he had when he was 10 and afraid to admit he'd broken a window. I opened the door. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "Not just for last night, for everything before it." I stepped aside, let him in. He looked around as if seeing the house for the first time, not small, not outdated, familiar. "You let someone rewrite you for me," he said, because it was easier to admitting I didn't know everything. I poured tea and placed it between us. You wanted to be the provider, I said. That's not wrong. I wanted control, he corrected, and I didn't notice when love turned into management. He swallowed hard. Are you cutting me off? I shook my head. No, I'm setting boundaries. He nodded slowly. I don't want your money. I want my mother back. I reached across the table and took his hand. Then you have work to do. That afternoon, Lena packed a bag. She didn't scream, didn't cry. She accused. You let her poison you, she said. Daniel didn't argue. Some truths don't need defending. By evening, she was gone. The house felt lighter already. Later that night, Daniel sent me a message. I don't expect forgiveness. I just don't want to lose you. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I replied, losing me was never the punishment. Becoming someone you couldn't respect would have been. That's when he finally understood. Regret doesn't sound dramatic. It sounds like quiet rooms, unanswered questions, and the slow realization that control costs more than love ever will. With Lena gone and the illusion shattered, how would Daniel rebuild his life, and what final choice would Evelyn make about her legacy?
People think quiet revenge feels like victory, like satisfaction, like closure wrapped neatly with a bow. It doesn't. When the noise finally fades, what's left isn't triumph, it's space. And space forces you to decide what actually matters when no one is watching. The morning after Daniel came to my house, I sat alone at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd once cried over overdue bills and impossible choices. I wrapped my hands around a warm mug and watched steam rise, thinking about legacy. Not money, not property. Legacy is what people carry when you're no longer there to explain yourself. Daniel called every day that week, not to ask for help, not to fix things, just to listen. He told me how empty the house felt without Lena, how silence had replaced certainty, how he'd realized he'd confused confidence with character. I mistook certainty for strength and control for love, he said once, and control for love. I didn't interrupt. Understanding has to arrive on its own to stay. A few days later, he came over again, this time without guilt in his posture, just humility. I'm seeing a counselor, he said, not because my marriage ended, because I lost myself. I nodded. That's the right reason. Then he surprised me. I want to earn your trust again, not as your son, as a man. That mattered. When he left, I stood at the doorway longer than usual, watching his car disappear. I didn't feel proud. I felt relieved. Because reclaiming power doesn't feel like winning. It feels like peace returning to where it always belonged. That afternoon, I met with Mr. Harris. We spread the documents across my dining table, not because I needed reminding, but because I needed clarity. I want to restructure, simplify, protect. He raised an eyebrow. For your son? I replied. For myself. I wasn't punishing Daniel, and I wasn't rescuing him. I was refusing to repeat the same mistake, confusing love with control. We discussed a trust, carefully structured, boundaries built into the design, support without dependency, protection without power over me. This ensures no one ever manages you again, Mr. Harris said. Or him, I added. That night, Daniel came over once more. He stood awkwardly near the door. You don't owe me anything, I said. I know, and I won't ask. I nodded. Good. He hesitated, then spoke quietly. I hope someday you'll be proud of me again. I reached for his face the way I did when he was small. I never stopped. He broke then, quietly, No drama, just the kind of tears that come when weight finally lifts. After he left, I sat alone in the living room. I thought about Lena, not with anger, with clarity. She hadn't destroyed my family. She'd revealed its fractures. She'd forced truths into the open that comfort had kept hidden. For that, I let her go. Not forgiven, not vilified, just irrelevant. Weeks passed, then months. Daniel changed, not quickly, not perfectly, but genuinely. He learned to ask instead of assume, to listen instead of manage, to love without control. And I learned something too. Silence is powerful, but only when it's chosen, not imposed. On my 69th birthday, Daniel handed me a card. Inside, he'd written, "You didn't just raise me, you corrected me. Thank you for not breaking me when it would have been easier." I closed the card and smiled, because the strongest revenge isn't exposure, it's dignity. It's knowing what to leave behind and having the courage to do it. With peace restored but boundaries set, would forgiveness soften the lines Evelyn fought to draw, or would her final decision redefine what family truly means?
Forgiveness is often misunderstood. People think it means returning to how things were, pretending the damage never happened, letting time smooth over what should have been confronted. That isn't forgiveness. That's fear disguised as peace. Real forgiveness doesn't erase memory, it rearranges it. Weeks passed and life settled into a quieter rhythm, not empty, intentional. Daniel didn't call every day anymore. He didn't need to. When he did call, it wasn't to ask advice or approval. It was to listen, to share, to be present without agenda. That told me more than any apology ever could. One afternoon, he came by with a small box. "I found these while cleaning," he said. Inside were photographs I hadn't seen in years. Me in my 20s, holding him with one arm while balancing fabric in the other. The tiny workshop, the first storefront. Moments I'd packed away so tightly I'd almost forgotten them myself. "I never really saw you," he admitted. "Not fully." I nodded. Most people don't recognize quiet strength until it stops protecting them. We sat together, flipping through the photos, not speaking much. No tension, no fixing, just shared history. Eventually, he asked the question I'd been expecting. "What happens when you're gone?" I didn't flinch. "I've already decided," I said. He waited. "I placed everything in a trust. You're the beneficiary, but it's structured." He frowned slightly. "Structured how?" "You won't access it freely until you're 50, I said calmly, "unless it's for education, health, or real need." He exhaled slowly. "That's fair." "It's not about the money," I added. "It's about ensuring no one ever manages either of us again." He looked at me, understanding settling in. "I wish I'd learned that earlier." "So do I replied. "But lessons arrive when we're ready to carry them." That evening after he left, I sat alone and thought about Lena. Not with bitterness, with distance. She hadn't ruined my family. She'd revealed its weak points. She'd forced honesty into spaces where comfort had allowed denial to grow. And for that, I released her. Not forgiven, not condemned, simply no longer relevant to my peace. Months later, I heard she'd moved back with her mother, sold the house, started over. I hoped she found clarity, or at least truth. As for Daniel, he grew, not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily. He learned to ask instead of decide, to listen without needing control, to love without managing. And I learned something too.
Silence can be strength, but only when it's chosen, not when it's demanded. On my 69th birthday, Daniel gave me another card. Inside, he'd written, "You didn't just raise me, you corrected me. Thank you for trusting me with the truth." I closed the card and felt something rare settle in my chest. Peace. Because the strongest ending isn't exposure, it's dignity. It's letting truth stand without shouting. It's walking away whole while others sit with what they lost. And if you're wondering whether I ever regretted staying quiet for so long, no, because when I finally spoke, they listened, and that made all the difference. With forgiveness defined and boundaries set, what final legacy would Evelyn choose to leave behind, and how would it shape the man Daniel was becoming?
Life didn't explode after everything settled. There were no dramatic family meetings, no public apologies, no neatly wrapped redemption arc. What came instead was time. Time to see who Daniel became when no one was watching. He didn't rush to explain the divorce to relatives or defend himself to people who whispered. When asked, he kept it simple. "We weren't aligned," he'd say, "and I had work to do." That answer told me more than any speech could have. He stopped performing, stopped proving, stopped borrowing confidence from other people. And slowly, without my pushing, he rebuilt himself. One afternoon, months later, he showed up wearing paint-stained jeans and holding a toolbox. "I'm fixing your back steps," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "You don't know how to do that?" He smiled. "I'm learning." He didn't ask permission, didn't announce his effort. He measured twice, miscut once, corrected it, and kept going. We didn't talk much that day. We didn't need to. Respect doesn't make noise. It shows up consistently. That evening, after he left, I sat on the porch and watched the sun sink low. I thought about how close I'd come to disappearing inside my own life, how easily dignity can be traded away when silence is mistaken for peace. I thought about Lena, not with resentment, with clarity. She wanted certainty in a world that doesn't offer it fairly. She believed control would protect her from fear. It never does. Fear just changes costumes. I hoped she'd learn that someday. As for me, I finally allowed myself something I'd postponed for decades. Rest. Not the kind that comes from exhaustion, but the kind that comes from closure. I traveled. Nothing extravagant. Small towns, quiet beaches, places where no one knew my story and didn't need to. I donated anonymously, supported women starting over later in life, single mothers, quiet fighters who reminded me of the woman I'd been at 28. I never told Daniel. Legacy doesn't require witnesses. One evening, we sat together watching the sky darken. "Do you ever regret not telling me sooner?" he asked. I considered the question carefully. "No," I said, "but I regret not trusting myself sooner when I felt disrespected." He nodded slowly. "I'll remember that." A year passed. Daniel was steadier, more thoughtful. He spoke less and listened more. He learned that strength doesn't come from managing others. It comes from managing yourself. On my 70th birthday, he didn't bring gifts. He brought a letter. Inside, he wrote about the man he wanted to be, the father he hoped to become someday, the promise he'd made to himself to never let love turn into leverage again. At the bottom, he wrote, "You taught me that power without humility is empty, and silence without dignity is dangerous." I folded the letter and placed it in my safe. Not with the documents, with the memories, because that is the real inheritance. Not buildings, not accounts, not numbers on paper, but lessons that don't expire. I didn't win. I didn't lose. I reclaimed. And that's a victory no one can cancel. With everything reclaimed and lessons learned, what remains when the silence finally lifts? And how does Evelyn choose to close her story?
People ask me now if I'm lonely. They ask it carefully, like loneliness is something contagious, like age automatically equals emptiness, like a woman standing alone must be missing something. I usually smile and say, no, I'm at peace. And that's the truth. Loneliness is wanting to be seen and never being noticed. Peace is being seen clearly and choosing your own company anyway. After everything that happened, my life didn't shrink, it expanded. Mornings became slower, intentional. I stopped rushing through coffee like there was somewhere I needed to prove myself. I started walking instead of driving short distances, just to feel the ground under my feet. I returned to hobbies I'd set aside when survival took priority. The woman before silence became strategy, before restraint was mistaken for weakness. Daniel visits once a week now. No schedule, no obligation. He knocks like a guest, not an owner. He asks before fixing things. He listens without interrupting. He no longer assumes access is automatic. That matters. We don't talk about Lima unless it's necessary, not because it's forbidden, but because the story doesn't need repeating. Some chapters close the moment you stop rereading them. One evening, while we were washing dishes together, he said something that stayed with me. I used to think strength meant control, he said. Now I think it means restraint. I nodded. Strength also means knowing when to walk away without needing the last word. He smiled. You did that. Yes, I did. And that's what saved us. Not confrontation, not humiliation, not punishment. Boundaries. Clear, quiet, unmovable. I never raised my voice, never begged to be respected, never chased validation. I simply stopped accepting less. And the strange thing is, once I did that, everything rearranged itself. People treat you differently when you're no longer available for manipulation. They listen when they realize access is no longer guaranteed. As for my legacy, I've made peace with it. Not everything I built will outlive me. Buildings change hands, accounts fluctuate, markets rise and fall. But character transfers quietly. Every time Daniel pauses before assuming, every time he asks instead of decides, every time he chooses humility over ego, that's mine. I didn't raise him perfectly, I didn't protect him from every mistake, but I taught him something far more valuable than comfort: how to return to himself after he lost his way. On my last birthday, Daniel asked if I wanted a big celebration. Family, friends, noise. I told him no. We had dinner just the two of us. Simple food, no speeches, no performance, just presence. Before he left, he hugged me longer than usual. He said, "I'm proud of you." I laughed softly. I've been proud of myself for a while now. And that's when I knew the story was complete. Not because everyone learned their lesson, but because I finally honored my own. If you're listening to this and you feel invisible, if people have mistaken your silence for permission, if someone has tried to manage your life because you didn't fight back, hear this clearly. You don't need to explain your worth. You don't need to expose everything to be powerful. You don't need revenge to reclaim yourself.
Sometimes the strongest move you can make is standing still and letting the truth arrive on its own. Because when it does, you won't need to say a word. They'll feel it, and you'll already be free. Quiet dignity outlives loud control, and the woman they underestimated was never weak. She was waiting. Stories like this don't always get told. If you want more narratives about quiet power, emotional intelligence, and real consequences, subscribe. It helps this channel grow, and it helps these stories reach people who need them.